What's up, everybody? All our friends and family, and whoever else, maybe first time listeners. This is Rooted in Revelation, where we seek to make God's revelation our foundation in all of life. And with me, Nick and Dallas haven't or not able to make it today, but we do have Sam with us. What's up, Sam?
Hey Nate, how's it going?
Good. And we have a special guest to talk some Tom Cruise stuff. We'll define that a little more later going into it, but we got with us Heath. How you doing, Heath?
Great to be with you guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, brother. And then hopefully, too, listeners, there's another fella, Jake. He may be joining in a little late. And when he does, we'll definitely make sure he says hi as well. But so yeah, Heath, who are you, man? And how did the Lord rescue you and bring you to where you are? And what's your current stead looking like?
Yeah, so yeah, we I think we've officially met through our podcasts, and uh, Jake, my one of our partners on our podcast channel, which is show it's X Garage, uh, kind of reached out. You guys connected, and so that's just kind of our background. Is we also do podcasts, and we also are about examining worldviews from the Christian worldview and expressing where they are creating another gospel, where that is other world religions are uh, falsifying good news. And so that's really what our channel is about. And so we'll talk a little bit about Tom Cruise and Scientology today, because that was one of our first series that we did, and it's just a fun one to talk about and share the gospel with, or as a basis to share the gospel. Uh, Myself, yeah, I'm actually studying at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland right now. I'm from Washington State, but I'm over here studying in systematic theology, particularly looking at soteriology, and uh, looking at the fall and restoration, and explaining it in terms of intercommunicative ontology rather than substantial or privation accidents ontology. That's my piece here. I don't know. I haven't talked to my supervisor to know how much I could share at this point, because I'm still in my first year. So, but yeah, that's a little bit about me. Oh, and how I came to know the Lord. That was just a life process. I had probably, I'd say at about around 18 years, 20 years old or somewhere in there. I had one of those Solomon moments where I realized everything I was pursuing was fleeting, and I was just in the moment crushed to realize that Christ was my only means of atonement and forgiveness. And that rocked me and got me into a journey of study and learning more. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, it's amazing. I think I've been thinking a lot about this recently. Sometimes, we can get into this is kind of like super random, but I'm just gonna say it because I want to. But like, you could get into these like big kind of, I know on Discord and some servers where you just kind of go back and forth with different atheists and stuff. And a lot of times, even with some of the Christian guys I run into, I'm just like, there's almost a sense by which I think there could be some good arguments made in like a more existential understanding of arguments for God as well, because it's like we're all created to worship and we're all worshiping something, right? And we're all connected and looking for things for identity and purpose. I know that sounds real Rick Warren of me to say, but I don't mean it that sense. But like, it
Right,
just
right.
seems like there could be um like, so we get to the I think we get to the root intellectually with a lot of people, and I've been thinking, how did we get to the root uh in people's desires and affections as well, connected with that? And I think there should be some, I'm sure maybe there's stuff out there that deals more with that, but I haven't found it. But I thought, yeah, I just think, because a lot of times a lot of our stories, where a lot of us aren't necessarily always converted by argumentation or intellectual rigor, some people, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it's just like, yeah, same with me, Heath. It was just like, and I know Sam probably as well, like it's just like you come to the end of yourself and realize like everything you're trying to find life in is just, it's vanity, and
Yeah.
it's just like it's like sand that you just sink and sink and sink no matter which way you go. And so like an emotional struggle as well, where you're trying to find some kind of gospel in life, but it all fails and shows itself unworthy to be trusted, and have certainty. And it kind of goes back to that whole, autonomous and skepticism, and living in a worldview like that. It just, you're lost and you're trying to find meaning of it, and just you can't. But yeah, that was just a random rant. I don't even know why I said that, but just you bringing up that idea really kind of
Yeah,
just reaffirmed some things in my brain I've been thinking about recently. um
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Amen to that, Paul. I mean, that's right. It's interesting that our existential, our struggles, and uh, com- as we comport our lives, that it's always intellectual at the same time, and yet oftentimes people overlook that we're always uh, thinking creatures, and so it's often not a putting one against the other. It's just realizing that everything's wrapped up in our being. We're always I mean, we come to the end of ourselves by thinking, as we've experienced our lives in pursuing those things that we found to be fleeting. And
Yeah.
in Christ, His word shows up as that word that does not flee or falsify or fall short. Yeah.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. um so so well, Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
uh
Yeah. Well, yeah. You mentioned Tom Cruise because we were talking, X Garage. One thing we did, one of our first, I think it was our first series that we did, was on Scientology. We thought, okay, if we're gonna start a podcast, we better do something that is gonna maybe just be something that people are curious about. And I've always wanted to get more into it. The most I had really read on it was Kingdom of the Cults with Dr. Walter Martin, and it just fascinated me, and so we said, okay, let's do it. So I ended up buying the Dianetics, his book. It's as Jake says, it's girthy. It's probably 600 pages. I don't know, but
Wow.
we went ahead and I read through the whole stinking thing just to say I did it. It was his font's fairly large, though. I'd say compared to some of the theology books we all have to read, it was probably more like a 300-page read. But getting into it, you realize just it was literally it is a religious. Oh, Jake's here. Religious faith. It's a faith system. Welcome.
So sorry, guys.
Oh.
Hello?
Hey, man, how's it going?
oh, I was
Doing
muted
really
that whole
good.
time.
Okay, there we
Wow.
go.
Yeah, I was like, why is everyone looking at me weird? But then I looked down, saw the red thing over my mute, and I was like, oh. But I was just saying, what's up, Jake? Welcome in. And we're just talking a little Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible.
Love it.
Starting
Yeah.
off.
So let me just get to that point real quick, and then we can get back to Jake here, because I
Yeah.
actually, if I started going on a rabbit trail, and Jake's going to like where I take this. I'm going to get straight to the point. So Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible. Actually, let's go straight to Oprah Winfrey jumping on the couch scene. I think we do. Do you guys recall that?
Mhm.
Yeah. So one thing is, I was reading that girthy book, Dianetics, and it was noted that one of those uh, ways of exemplifying your spirituality was through heightened energy. Of course, charisma, as we see oftentimes, even some Christian groups getting into this idea of energy as some way of showing or modeling Christ likeness, which of course is not rooted scripturally, can't be established. But Scientology, actually, one of the main parts of their system is that as you go through Dianetic therapy and you release these, they're called engrams, and the stored information, it also releases energy into your body that was or energy into your soul, and that then imports it affects your movement as a bodily creature. Or let me, yeah. So Tom basically was clear. He was what they would call clear or near that. I don't know if he actually was deemed a clear at that point, but and that's why he was jumping around on the couch and exuding energy, is because that was actually foundational to his belief system, to really model a life that's actually been quote unquote saved from aberrations and poor thinking and these things that weigh down the spirit in us. I be kind of using Eastern ways of Hinduistic and what is that? Would that be more Buddhistic ways of thought? Yeah. And so Tom had released all his energy, and so he had all this great wealth of energy to display on that show, which was just an outworking of Scientology and their inner way of thinking.
Mm.
So it wasn't just a random jumping around. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
It literally displays the truth of that we talk about within theology all the time, is that belief always plays in your practice. That's not, those don't separate.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah, I mean, is it true Tom Cruise is like tiny and he has to wear like shoes that make him look taller or something like that? Is that true?
I think it's all camera tricks, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah. I don't know. Someone told me
Yeah,
he's like mad short.
That's what I use. I got certain cameras in this room, so I look a certain stature and form next to your guys' screens.
Yeah.
Heath is trying to make himself look smaller to make us feel a little better about ourselves because he's massive.
Yeah.
Right. That's great.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. Well, since Jake is in here, Jake, if you just wanted to say what's up to everybody and a little bit about yourself and how the Lord rescued you real quick and a brief bio.
Yeah, super sorry about being late, guys. Totally my bad. Yeah,
okay.
got it. Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah, normally I wake up at 4 or 5, and for whatever reason, yesterday just was not happening. Anyway, my name is Jake. Is it my name and how I was saved?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't remember. Just grew up in a Christian household. I knew I grew up in the faith, and just kind of steadily took it more seriously as I got older. And I remember saying the prayer when I was 6, but I know that I was already at that point. I was already in belief and believing it, and so yeah, that's the best I got.
Good stuff. Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying it. I mean, really, I don't even really know when the Lord saved me. What matters is not so much a date as it matters just knowing that you believe it right now, right? So
Heck yeah.
that's what matters. But yeah, so thanks for that, Jake. Sam, you got anything to say so far?
Not yet. No, I'm just
All
sitting
right,
back
cool.
to the Tom Cruise stories. Yeah.
All right, cool. So I guess we'll kind of dive into like just what is Scientology as a worldview and where did it come from and stuff. What's the origins of it?
Yeah. Jake, do you want to share? Or you want me to start off with that?
Sure, I'll share a little bit because unless I share first, I'll have nothing to say. I mean, essentially, it's the crazy wild stories of L. Ron Hubbard. Part of it depends on how much you want to take of his life being real, but his story was that he was a fiction writer, which is true. I mean, he wrote lots of fictions, pumped out lots and lots of books, and then he kind of started spinning these stories about him traveling the world, meeting a bunch of different gurus. You know, what's funny is his fake story reminds me of the real story of what's her name, Madame
Blavatsky. Yeah.
Blavatsky.
With the outfit.
She actually did travel the world, but there's some record indications that he's probably lying about a lot of this stuff. But he claims to have traveled from like India to China, studied Buddhism, studied different religions that are different, high level spiritual mentors and stuff like that. And so, but I think even more important to his system than that is he kind of claims there is this scientific, systematic way that he discovers all this stuff. So it's readily available to anyone, so to speak. But since he is the highest level, like so far surpassing anybody else in this system, that he is the only one that's able to uncover um, the deepest treasures of Scientology. So it's not really scientific, but that is the way that he goes about explaining it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, he basically is saying, you know, over the years, various he tends to focus more on the fields of various scientific fields. So like he'll talk about physiology and maybe evolution or different fields where he just takes whatever data he wants and he applies it how he wants. And he basically just argues that all this wealth of knowledge has been around. It's not just me. So he's kind of got this real rhetorical style of, I think, bringing people along with him, because he does sound really reasonable. He's saying, you know, of course we've came across evolution, and you know that's part of this, and you know that's true. But then he just argues that he was the one that was able to systematize and put together all the data into a true way of understanding life. And so he's not afraid to say, you know, he takes stuff from Hindu Buddhistic ways of thought. He even would say, like Jake mentioned, like he traveled the world and experienced all these different places. And so it really comes down to, he's saying, even in terms of their revelation and what they believe and how do you know what you know, they basically say it's all empirical. But it's not really all empirical. It's basically Hubbard taking data and trying to make sense of it to bring about a way in which he sees the world. And so really, Dianetics, the book, is the foundational book of Scientology and its system today, is basically his creative way of looking at life. But those who are higher members in Scientology do have the ability to add and change things, so long as the foundations of which Hubbard has established don't change, which is fascinating. You know, here's a quote actually: "Man has known many portions of Dianetics in the past thousands of years, but the data was not evaluated for importance, was not organized into a body of precise knowledge. In addition to things known, if not evaluated, Dianetics includes a large number of new discoveries of its own about thought and the mind," which goes back to the definition of Scientology, which he again created the word. He took a Latin verb, to know, and then he combined that with the Greek word, for just this. Basically, it was the study of knowledge is what he did with it. I think, where's that at? I have some notes here. Make sure I got the right. Yeah, the study of knowledge. He's just basically taking logos from the Greek and then applying skio from Latin. The Latin.
Skio, yeah, skio, skira. Yeah, I was going to ask about that kind of cross-linguistic etymology, because it seems rather odd.
Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun?
Yeah,
he's a fascinating. That just shows his fascinating mind. I mean, just what's he doing?
Right. And just real quick, does the term Dianetics as well go back to him? And what's the, just while we're talking etymology, is that like dia noeo or something, or?
You know, I think that's somewhere in our notes, but I can't recall. I would not be surprised. Do you recall, Jake?
Trying to look it up right now. All Google is saying is
Okay.
its origin in the Greek. It's just
Through.
I don't speak Greek, so forgive me. It's just dianoetikos, which is just relating to thought.
Yeah, so through thought, that's what it was. And
Gotcha,
I think that's yeah, another one of his creations, I'm almost certain, but I just don't have a citation to say it with certainty. But what's funny is on Scientology.org, so they explained it as, their definition was the study of handling the study of and handling of the spirit in relation to itself, universes, and other life. So that's on their site. So really what's fascinating, maybe this is go into another topic really, but there, as we had that book we put out with our notes, Ex-Garage notes, and in a systematic fashion it goes through it in the theology proper section. It really talks about how they equate that life in us, that Tom Cruise life that came out on the couch, with divinity. So they're definitely Eastern in that sense, right?
Yeah.
And so when it talks about this handling of the spirit and studying of the spirit or the mind and spirit for them is divinity, and it is this power that we all have, and we ultimately want to escape go on to the next evolutionary level, which is where Ron Hubbard is now. So it's a real system.
Yeah.
By the way, our book is available on Amazon.
Oh, it's like a legit book.
Yeah,
It's a collection of notes, but it is a legit.
Oh, that's great. I'll have to pick that up.
Yeah, I think the thing that's helpful about it is just because it cites throughout all of Dianetics in those important spots. So if someone wanted to get those key citations and where to go into Dianetics and have to read through the whole thing, this little book has pretty much all those key spots cited.
That's cool. Yeah,
That's awesome. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good.
No, I was just gonna say I love from what little I know of popular accounts of Scientology, that they seem to focus more on the kind of like human aspect. So I love that you guys tackle it as a worldview, and it's just like, here's its text. We're gonna dive in and just like exposit what these guys actually think. You know, it's very cool.
Yeah, that's kind of our overarching goal for what we do at Ex-Garage, because a lot of cults don't do their primary goal isn't to systematize what they believe.
Right.
So it is kind of a vague task to a degree, but luckily there are some groups like Scientology that lay out to a degree what they think. So I mean, if they give us their own particular vocabulary for those distinctions, we'll try to use those. But figure normally the categories within a systematic theology are efficient for describing what other groups believe as well, even if they aren't like the ways that they think about themselves. But it does help for a grid to kind of push them through to help understand.
Right.
No, yeah, I think that's great. That's super helpful. Yeah, I mean, the fact that you guys did that so unique and pretty awesome to my brain. So I appreciate you guys doing that, because yeah, there's like this I realize there's this like dynamic where there's like kind of like the academic scholarly world, right, where like you have your real hefty people talking about all the big things, and then you have like kind of this more intermediate kind of YouTube popularity kind of stuff that not many people like talk about or deal with, but everyone's wondering about it. And I just appreciate you guys kind of come in and fill that gap a little bit, you know. So a lot of times I say I kind of like the middle ground, guys like yourselves. Not saying you'll be there forever. Maybe you'll be up there. I know Heath probably talking about his education and whatnot, living out there in the big UK. But yeah, I just appreciate people, because there's a lot of things that I think things that mostly influence people are going to be television nowadays, and YouTube and Facebook and what you get on there. And, you know, as Christian apologists, I think it's good that we kind of meet people in them ways, and offering the Christian worldview in response to a lot of these other kind of perspectives and whatnot. So yeah, it's super cool you guys did that.
It was all Heath, man. He did a good job.
Well, I just thought, well, I mean, I think we all had the idea at Ex-Garage. We all thought in a systematic way, and knowing that every worldview, if it's a worldview, it is systematic. We think in certain ways. We think we have premises and we have conclusions. Our actions, our actions are that way. We can't, you can't get away from it. And so I thought, even at some point, we're going to do atheism, and we're going to categorize it by revelation, theology proper, anthropology, soteriology. They do have a view of salvation, which is basically humanism or whatever. Maybe it's fatalism, but it just depending on what atheists we're looking at. But
branch.
What branch? So anyhow,
So
it
many
is fun to think of it that
man.
way. I think that was something that
Atheism
really
has
hit
more
us.
denominations than Protestantism, man.
That's pretty valid.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, it would fit a Darwinian perspective. Each individual has its own unique genetic chain, so they have their own unique way of thinking. So maybe that's it goes down to splintering to each individual. Anyway, yeah. So it was fun. It's fun to do this, and then like Jake mentioned, it's also hard at times because you have groups like right now we're doing Rastafarianism, where they don't have a whole lot of anything real concrete that they actually say with unanimity. And
I think the most substantive beliefs they have is that Africa is important and weed is awesome.
Yeah.
That's as consistent as it gets.
Well, there you go. Weed salvation, and Africa's the promised land.
That's right.
Basically.
Yeah, it was convincing. It was convincing stuff. No, yeah. So it is also. So I think it does provide helpful. Hopefully, at the end of the day, with the way we're doing our podcast, like you said, kind of bringing in that middle ground where it gives substantial materials, and also we're thinking about writing stuff in ways that everyone can understand it. It's not just an academic. It's definitely academic, but it's not in such a way that if someone reads it, they're gonna be, I have to go look up every other term. It's not like that. So a lot of what we put out is for everyone. It is for even Scientology. That book, we hope that someone who's involved in Scientology would read it, and actually, as they look through the way we systematized it, they can't really argue with the basic parts of what we're expressing about their faith and practice, that those are what it is, and they have to deal with that. I find it really strange that it's sad. I think it's part of being an atom is that we don't actually deal with our worldviews. We just kind of live in them and don't want to have to confront them, because when we do is when we see our flaws in them, and it actually brings us back to the person of Christ. And I find all these cults and these other worldviews that you just don't have people really trying to engage their own thought process in the ways in which we've seen theologians do throughout history. I mean, even before the systematicians of coming out of the Reformation onward, even before that, you got the early church fathers. They were deeply engaged in their belief and their thought. And anyhow, I just find that's really a beautiful thing about the Christian knowing the Lord in Christ, is that we actually understand that it's his truth that conforms us and changes us. And so we draw ourselves into this sharpening iron, into conversations like this, where I don't know if that could be said well. I mean, Islam, maybe Hinduism, definitely they have a lot of thinkers, but that'd be something else to look at in terms of how they go about their systematics. And I don't know enough about them.
Islam definitely, but most of the religious groups that are more systematic tend to be offshoots of Christianity to one degree or another, like Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Hinduism may be an exception to that.
And maybe that, thinking out loud, think about it, those are the word-centric type faiths. So like Mormonism is another one that would be very much into declaring propositions, and so I'll have to rethink that a little bit. But I do think obviously those would be faulty grounds in which they've come under an angel that gave them revelation for another gospel. So,
but they get their tradition and type of thinking from Christianity, so that makes sense. Same with JW.
Yeah, right. Right. So kind of a, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys could bust out like a 40 volume set on a systematic theology of every religion in the world and cult.
That's the goal, man.
Yeah.
40 volumes.
40. Just my shelves are just systematic theologies of everything you guys wrote. Be the holy writ, you know.
We'll start a new religion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on that topic, while we're talking JWs and Mormonism, that might just be a good opportunity to get this in. What's your guys' kind of working definition of a cult? How do you distinguish that from an established non-Christian religion? Is it just novelty, or is there a more kind of substantive or like, yeah, substantive way of defining that?
I'll just start by saying, I mean, in general, I think colloquially we can use it as a religion that denies Christ as Lord. And there are cultic practices of some Christian groups where they deny things like sola scriptura and so forth. But I think most of them we're talking about groups that are not Christian, in the way that we use it.
Yeah. And I think on kind of how I personally would want to unpack that is a couple things I want to look at. Is one is in terms of a Christian cult, is are they arguing that they are presenting the true gospel and that the Christian faith as has come up to us today in Catholicism, Protestantism, and Eastern Orthodox, something outside of those binding creeds between the three? If they're saying that they have the gospel while rejecting those certain creeds, and that's on a general level. Now, someone could argue even tighter and say, actually, the real essence of Christendom has come up to us in the particular Reformed creeds. I wouldn't go that far. I would stick with the things like with Chalcedon and things on the person of Christ, the nature of God, triune, etc. That these things. Now, if you got someone coming in and saying, no, this is not true, it's this, we would. I think Jake and I and all of us would say, oh, that's a Christian cult in its true sense. But with that, I'd say, I think another thing that I kind of see common and maybe a more high form of cultic, how I define a cult, would be its ideology based. So it's not allowing its internal, its theology actually breeds the inability for its body to think freely, to think as a free creature in terms of their own subjective ability, just to share their own thoughts on even an important essential doctrine, which is the freedom we have in Christ. Maybe this is another point that Islam does not have, where we actually can go at it. And again, I'm not a Islam scholar of any sort, and that's why I would I hope we get into that more later. But I'd say this idea that when you can't approach an elder or a leader in a way that would respectfully either disagree or struggle, allow them to know your struggles and whatnot without being excommunicated for those simple things. Rather, so I think what I'm thinking of, and I'll say this, and I'll stop. I'm kind of long-winded sometimes, all the time probably, is that with Jehovah's Witnesses, they do have that ideological excommunication type way about them, as when we study, and we saw that really deeply. To think otherwise is really to be ostracized. I mean, just to be done away with. I think that to me is another big part of it. And so yeah, but no, I guess I'm not done. One more thing is that on a broader scale, I think going back to the biblical revelation that we were created, Adam, and then from there the fall and the distortion of truth is so in that sense that all the nations have been formed as a wandering away from God and His Word. That in that sense, I would argue that there really is a cultic behavior in if we have a right understanding of sin, that is a part of our fundamental brokenness, is this cultic behavior that would shut God out and create its own system of thought and way of life. That's a broader way. I think that's fundamentally the heart of it. We've rejected God, and so anyone who's not really receiving Christ as his word is properly the essence of a cult. And they don't want to hear. We don't, apart from the Spirit, we don't want to hear God's word as it is.
Mm-hmm. It's
Yeah,
amazing how the aim for human autonomy is the thing, because often a lot of these cults are aiming for something that gives them more autonomous reason to one degree or another. I think that's part of the appeal of Scientology, is it sounds like it gives you more power. It sounds like it gives you more reasoning capabilities within yourself, and it ends up trapping you. And it makes you, if there's like you said, Heath, there's freedom in Christ, and even if cults promise this liberty of thought, it ends up binding you just to yourself.
Yeah, I think gospel's the only one, only it's when you're saved by grace as the basis. No other world religion has that, and it's on that basis that a true faithful church has the ability to keep that freedom. Is that basis of grace is salvation, and then yeah, totally with you. And I think it's goes with back to the idea that's just other world religions can promise all kinds of things. Scientology, I think that is the reason why it blew up so much, is it promised so much. It's kind of, I hope it's withered. I haven't looked at their numbers over the years, but I'd say it really blew up because it came out during a time where people were really getting into psychology, and Hubbard came out with a new way of looking at life that would free you of all your pain, and promised all kinds of things, promised real free thinking. And yet, once you get into it, you find out that the individuals who are deeply into it are not free thinkers. They can't think for themselves. I mean, I think there's documentaries on that side of it. But as you come into it, they say, "Oh, we're all about scientific reasoning and thinking, and really exemplifying your own being as a spiritual being." But no, you're right. It's a very indoctrinating, isolating, and manipulative group, and that goes back to its theology. Yeah, that's kind of going on a bunny trail.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me how it's kind of like a lot of these offshoots and cults and things, or even atheism, agnosticism, just whatever isn't, I'll just say whatever isn't the Christian worldview. There's always a sense of like, there's some liberty on the other side of it, or some kind of liberation to free thinking and to reasoning, and you're not held in bondage to Christian orthodoxy and doctrine. And so you actually are going to be more liberated. You'll be a more humble person. You'll be a smarter person because you'll be able to think outside the box. But what's interesting, as soon as you leave that context and that worldview, you actually end up building your own little box that you fall into that you can't escape. Except the Christian one isn't really actually a box. It's just because people prefer their futility of mind more so than the word of God,
Amen. Yeah.
So what are some of the, I guess, the kind of like, so we kind of like, what exactly would you say Scientology is like, kind of like, so I had a friend that went through a drug and alcohol rehab, and it was like a Scientology drug and alcohol rehab. And he told me some of the weird things or something, or at least they used principles of that nature in the place. And it was just I can't remember all the stories off the top of my head, but they made him do like super strange things, like just kind of ritualistic stuff where you'd have to like repeat to yourself that you don't have issues like 100 times or something, just like weird things to kind of like trick yourself into believing things that weren't true, but you're kind of kind of like, The Secret, that book, like ask, believe, receive, like that kind of philosophy. the law of attraction, even like that kind of stuff, like where they would just be like, yeah, I just don't have a drug issue. I don't have a drug issue. And they'd just like be told to say it, to keep saying it all day, every day. I don't have a drug issue, to like retrain their brain that they're really not a drug addict and stuff. Just what's your thoughts on some of the practices and how that stuff plays out more so? Both
The
you
first
guys.
thing that comes to mind is the cans, right, Heath?
Yes.
So I'm trying to remember exactly what the exact mode of those things were, but it was basically what you're talking about, this way that you kind of overcome yourself, and there's two people in a room, and it sounds like a very abrasive sort of setup. Do you remember what the particulars of that was, Heath?
Um, the the cans, don't recall, but I didn't get into their tools there in terms of their science, their uh, uh, procedural tools, so, or whatever, however you'd want to call those. But in terms of the thought behind all that, yeah, that was used along with the little meter machine, I think, as well, where
Yep, it's
it would
basically a
it
lie
would,
detector called the
and so
e-meter.
yeah, and so what would go on is in that time in those sessions, the idea of recalling something over and over again, that you would notice that the way the thought stimulates your emotions, your inner life would start to go down, and as soon as it could show that it was no longer frightening you or causing some type of
That's right.
irrational behavior, then you're claimed to have been released of that core thought or energy, and you're now able to even upon hearing that of that experience, you're able to analytically, you're okay now because you're not moved in a wrong way. So it's basically the idea is they call it a reactive mind, and it records. There's this mind in our minds that records all our painful experiences when we're all the time, really, but it really does it when we're unconscious, or maybe we've been using drugs or something that has got you into a state where you're not really being
And all
analytical.
the and not just our minds too, but also the, what is it called, the thetans that inhibit our body.
Yes. Oh gosh. Yeah. What I was to say, you have your analytical mind, which is your reasoning, and then you got your reactive mind, which is this mind that's always going on, even when you're unconscious, and it's taking in information. And then what will happen is when whatever the reactive mind wants, it will respond to information and send it into your brain, and that is what charges up bad behavior. And part of it is genetics, that they'd actually go into this idea, like Jake mentioned with genetics, where thetans, these little divine energy sources or beings, are in your body from past generations. Again, that idea of evolutionary processes. And so you're affected on all levels. And the goal of the process is, by repeating things, you're they wouldn't use the word. In reality, you're just being desensitized and calloused, and you're not actually dealing with the problems. And I think that's one of the saddest and parts of the system, is you got a lot of people walking around that are not healed by a genuine gospel and truth that reconciles their past hurts in relationships, but you're actually healed, quote unquote healed, not truly, by just burying the issues and just being so mind numbed to them that you just, instead of entering into that life of reconciliation, you're just kind of walking around carrying all these burdens, but they no longer affect you emotionally, which I think is a really interesting condition. I mean, depressing, really.
Yep. There's a story of I think it might have even been in Dianetics, but it just struck me as just like being so sad. But they gave the story of imagine there is this kid and his grandma, and the kid got sick, and the grandma kept on taking care of this kid. Now, say this grandma was the only one that was showing him a particular kind of care. Brought him chicken noodle soup, tried her best to actually show love. Now, in the Scientology system, because of the kind of philosophy devices they have set up, this kid is now basically being programmed to be sick because it's the only time that he's receiving love. So in a sense, that gives them grounds for basically blaming the grandma for his ailments.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, and that's definitely sad.
Oh,
Go ahead.
and with that, you might like this for something to kind of feed off of. It goes back to your point of the whole sessions. What are they like? Another fascinating point is that they, on one hand, in their system, they're arguing that when you're unconscious, you're in a place where you can bring back your reactive mind can log in bad information that then acts on you poorly. Well, part of their system of Dianetics is in that therapy session is to get you into an almost trance-like state where you're literally on the verge. If not, he even there's a quote of him, I think it's in our book where I have a citation where he mentions that he actually admits that at times people do fall into a kind of a trance or a unconscious state. And I think this ties into this the demonology aspect of their system, of its controlling and its opening doors for potential being influenced by powers and principalities that are not just merely your therapist sitting there.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of. Yeah, they're kind of into. Do they have like a perspective on like kind of like aliens and superpower stuff or something like that, or is
Yep.
that something else? Okay, no, that's right.
Jake,
Okay.
yeah, Jake's got that one. Yeah.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, so one of the reasons why we have thetans or other beings that kind of inhabit our body that we're trying to get rid of is because there was this kind of intergalactic war going on. And so I think it was the conquering power, or oh, you know what? Maybe this was the one about the overpopulation. I think that's what it was. Because
Yeah.
that was another thing that was like really starting back then is the overpopulation of the earth. And so that was kind of the story that he was using to jump off of in an intergalactic sort of way. So that ruler took a bunch of those people, froze them, and transported them to a volcano on Earth and just threw them in there. Just dumped all those people in the volcano. And then here are these wandering thetans that basically just attach themselves to any live person. So we all have like thousands of these things attached to our bodies that we have to get rid of.
And the only way to do it, here's a quote, I think, in Dianetics, it's the only thing which could ever begin to shake these engrams, which is where this is that weird stuff that's in our bodies. The only way to begin to even shake these engrams was the technique which developed into Dianetic therapy. So he's basically saying that the promise of your salvation is our therapy. There's no other way. That's the whole heartbeat of this therapy, is that it's saying, if you really want genuine liberty, you have to use our system.
Yeah, it
And that's
sounds
so.
like.
Oh
No, go Sam.
no, I feel like so there's so many like strains of thought coming into this. We've talked about the Eastern element. I feel like there's obviously like a modern like psychological thing in the sense that like all of our problems are primarily subjective rather than them being like the result of our objective estrangement from God. But then what's jumping out at me that with the thetans and stuff is the Gnostic element. Like you see from everything from like, you know, Manichaeism to Kabbalah, you see this idea of like there's like sparks or whatever like inhabiting our bodies, and like we need to rid ourselves of this energy, you know. So that's very interesting.
That's right. It's a good tie there. I think so. It's definitely, a lot of his thought really isn't new or anything. I think he's right when he says that he's systematized it in a way that no one else has. It's just, yeah, I think that's a good claim. And like Jake mentioned with this extra what were they called? These guys that just show up on the planet.
I think they're the spirit form of them is called Phaetons, I think.
They were Phaetons as well. So yeah, like which makes sense because for him, that which is
that's just that's just the word for spirits. Never mind.
Okay, I was gonna say for them that spirit, like you just mentioned with the Eastern ideas, that Tim is fundamental to their whole system. Their idea of God, or what he actually, again, to go to the point of using other philosophies and religions. I mean, he's doing all over the place. He uses the unmoved mover, and he appeals to the early Greek use of it with Aristotle and others, and he uses that as their base for having an objective way of talking about divinity. Is he says that it's because it's necessary. It's just logical. Therefore, in our system, we have to have it, and so we have this divinity, and we're going to call that infinity. So for those who get onto Scientology.org, you'll notice that when they talk about this eighth dynamic, it's called infinity. That's just another term for this idea of phaeton, and that we're all phaetons, and a part of theta, we are phaetons. I think that's the distinction he makes. That everybody is theta, but not. But as we're embodied in this body, we are phaetons. That's right. So definitely, he's borrowing from Aristotle. He borrows the clean slate, the tabula rasa, and he uses that, saying, we're born with purity again, because this goes back to that mystic that Greek idea of this pure spirits. So of course we're a clean slate, and that these aberrations that come upon us are done throughout our lives by poor experiences. But then it falls in on itself, like Jake mentioned. You have these things. Our genetics actually are damaged. Somehow we've been carrying up these real spiritual metaphysical properties that are weighing us down. On what sense are we a clean and pure slate? So there are many inconsistencies within it, of course, but that's as the more we talk about it, the more I'm just kind of like saddened by the fact that I think there's millions of people, isn't that their number, that have been involved in or practicing? I think it's a pretty high number still.
I'm not sure how big their organization is, but it's a lot of people.
Yeah. How did it become so? How did it become something where, like, say, for example, like we mentioned, like Tom Cruise and that, who was that other woman that was like in the documentary? She's like on like Everyone Loves Raymond, or no, maybe it was.
Oh, no, an offshoot of Everybody Loves Raymond, King of Queens.
Yes, yeah, King of Queens, the wife of the husband guy.
What was her name?
Yeah. But like, yeah, I was just gonna say,
Leah Remini.
Yeah. How did Hubbard, sorry, or his offspring, like get into like Hollywood and affect all these more richer, wealthier people with this stuff?
Well, he's my opinion first off is that he's extraordinarily charismatic. So he's interesting to watch. He recorded a lot of his stuff, but I think part of it is just that his practice was out of that area. There's also a lot of like cultic practices that I think were starting in Hollywood around that time. So he was somewhat connected with Aleister Crowley, not directly, but some of his disciples were in contact with L. Ron Hubbard. So I think there was some Hollywood connection there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so but he also knew some other actors, but I think a big part of it was just his level of charisma.
Yeah, I think Jake mentioned a really good point. His charisma. Just watch some of the videos. I think there's some on YouTube still. Just watching him talk, he kind of reminds you. Just he's gifted in that way, but what he is saying is foul and sad. But
it's garbage.
Yep. So another thing is when he was that science fiction writer, I think he began to be known somewhat as an intellectual because he wrote more words, I think, than anyone in the modern history. I think he's one of those, or at least at the top. I almost say he is at the top in terms of word count. And so he had little things going for him, and then in terms of just just kind of prowess. But I think all overall, he also found himself, like you said, Jake, in that location, and his interesting relationship with Crowley and some of those, and from there, I think is where we see the ties to some of the more wealthy and movie star types. But there is, I don't know if it's in our book or anything, but there is a reason behind the involvement of movie stars, and I can't remember what that was. Yeah, but that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, I was just looking at the Scientology website, and I didn't realize I had Sunday. I think that's what it said. They have church services, public worship services that are open to members and non-members of the church.
And Nate, did you know we have a Church of Scientology in Buffalo?
Yeah, I actually have
Yeah.
a weird story. I walked by there one time years ago, maybe like 7 years ago, and it's this real nice building in downtown Buffalo, New York. And I don't know how they got it, but they had it. And you'd walk by and people would be standing outside and they'd be like, oh, like, come in, let us tell you about what we believe and what we're about. And I always had this super strange vibe from them. Like, you ever just get that kind of that subjective, intuitive, just kind of like something's up with this. And that's exactly what it felt like when I met these people. They seem very like robotic and kind of like strangely they just acted a little off.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that goes back to them being put through that therapy and almost a brainwash type of evangelism, where they're not even really that keyed in on their own presence and the way reality really is. And that goes back to, again, I think it personally ties into a lot of that demonic activity that Hubbard was initially introduced to with early on, and before he even wrote Dianetics, I think, or around that time. I mean, there's a whole chapter in the book called, I think it's entitled Demons or something about the demon or something. And he spends a lot of ink on just trying to say that demons do not exist. It's just, he's kind of buying, he's using that nice rhetoric that you would find that would be palpable for modern psychologists, who he actually mimics some of their language of that, demons are not real. It's just, if we only knew Dianetics in this form of therapy, we would not have to appeal to demons to explain sinful conditions or even use the word sin. So he's even, basically just arguing that, all hurt and pain is just through experiences, and there's no demons, and yet he does in his system have divinity. He has, clearly, we're spiritual beings, yet he denies angelic beings without a basis. That's what was interesting. I don't think there's a single proposition in that chapter. Someone could double check me on that, but I don't think there's a single actual concrete explanation he gives on why he denies them. He just outright denies them, and yet everything about his system would follow that pattern of the serpent from Eden, in terms of his way of thinking, his way about manipulating, his way about distorting truth, and etc. It literally is a system that I think we talked about in our podcast, that if there's a way for a system to really let Satan have ground, it's by continually saying he doesn't exist and he's not a part of our system. So it's interesting.
Did you have something to add, Heath, about the connection between Wicca and Scientology, or that kind of paganism? It looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, well, I just don't know how much time we have.
Okay.
I don't want to be running my mouth.
I'm good as long as you guys want to stay. So,
Okay.
but if it's up to you guys.
Yeah,
So I got a bit longer.
Okay. Jake, did you have a thought before I go running off on that?
You go ahead, man.
Yeah. So the with early witchcraft, the fundamental essence of Scientology about controlling your own end and wielding your spirit to, because ultimately in practice it's about living your fullness of life, having all the blessings of life, and really it has that guise of perfecting your own world into the max of what it means to be a human. So to have a good family, to have the right income, to be free of disease, all that stuff, things similar to what you'd see in a prosperity gospel, of course. But they have that, but a lot of it is about wielding that energy from within you and using trance-like states. All these little elements are the very same elements you find in early witchcraft, and even up today into the way that the Wiccan practices are, which we observed in another one of our research that we did, or in a research series that we did on modern witchcraft. But which is interesting is it appeals to a source of power that is not Christ. And this source of power reveals to the people of the group, i.e. Scientology with Hubbard, was led to believe that the energy is that is in us is the basis for giving us the fullness of life. That's the same thing that's in witchcraft, where they try to draw energy from the earth through their rituals, through their practices, and to use that energy in a way that would create a powerful existence to manifest their own presence in the world. And really it deifies the self, and the end and the beginning, or the beginning and the end, is all about self, and it's sad.
It's weird. It's weird that like the degree of separation between L. Ron Hubbard, obviously in his connection to the religion of Thelma, and Wicca, there's only a few degrees of separation between them.
Say it again. That's
so
a good point.
Thelma is the religion of Aleister Crowley. I think L. Ron Hubbard may have met Aleister Crowley, but he definitely had some connection to that religion, or somebody that was staying with him did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Aleister Crowley had direct connection to the founder of Wicca. Like they at least knew each other well. And I think there was a point where Aleister Crowley asked if what was his name, Green, for his first name?
Which
the founder of Wicca.
Oh, what was his name?
Anyway, L. Ron Hubbard asked if not L. Ron Hubbard. Aleister Crowley asked if the guy that started Wicca, I think, wanted to take over his religion, or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's a fascinating figure. But we did do a podcast on that with on modern Wicca, or paganism, modern paganism for the family, I think is what it was titled. But we do talk about that individual, Green something or something like that. I can't remember his last name, but yeah, anyone that's doing any comparative religion study is going to note the essence of witchcraft, even I mean, on levels that are ridiculous, are what Hubbard's doing within therapy, and he's bringing into the, like you noted,
Gerald Gardner.
Gerald Gardner, yeah. So what, like Sam, I think you may have noted, it's gotten into the universe, or maybe it was Nate, I don't know which one of you, but it got into the university setting. It's basically, for in my mind, and the way I'm seeing it, is that Hubbard's way of his Dianetic therapy has brought in demonology into basically the university system, and teaching it, and ways of which open up people to the not using their minds, but allowing people, or again, if we're starting with in angelology that admits to fallen angels who actually do deceive and work to destroy image bearers. And we have a system here in Hubbard being used in coursework and practice that actually does just that. And I think, like you mentioned, going up to the foot of that door and having that personal encounter with these individuals that you notice is just this kind of lifelessness about it. And so I think, again, the practice plays out because of their theology, and their theology relates definitely deep into witchcraft and looking for spiritual answers apart from God's word.
Yeah, it's good. I don't know why, but talking about the Scientology stuff makes me think of that movie, The Island. You remember the movie called The Island? It was like that science fiction thriller with Michael Bay.
Bones or something, or
yeah, they like get sent to this paradise island and told like everything's gonna be great, and they're gonna be like, I forget. Do you know the plot maybe a little better than me, Sam?
no, I saw it right around when it came out, which is like early 2000s, I think. So.
2005. But it just had that very kind of like, I think what's so deceptive about it is it has like that very kind of more modern scientific feel to it. Like it seems more like just like normal kind of like psychology and medicine and just kind of like this, you know what I mean? It has like, it's kind of like you think of abortion clinics, like they look clean and professional, but they're committing murder. And it's like Scientology like looks clean and professional and like really helpful, but it's like demonology. You know what I mean? It's just like interesting how I think the culture's taught us to think that like why do I keep butchering that? Demonology. Like is always like this like real dark and like gothic, you know, the guys with the super baggy pants with the chains all over them. And like they always portray it as like this weird, strange kind of like vampires, and you know what I mean?
You just hit on a great point that Gerald Gardner, you're just bringing back memories now from study, but that was one of his main arguments when he was bringing witchcraft into the modern era. That was his goal, was to bring witchcraft up, or one of his goals. I don't know only, but probably his fundamental one was he was writing in a way that would show that witchcraft isn't this crazy weird stuff that you see portrayed in movies. It's not, or this you know, kind of this tacit understanding of it where you just have horns and people eating chickens, and like he was basically saying like no, witchcraft is actually a good thing, and it's fit for society, and it's actually about, again, wielding your fullness of your potential, and so these spirits that they're actually communing with give them knowledge and insight and power to wield their existence. And that's the same thing Hubbard Systems is doing, is it's coming at this saying, no, this is actually, maybe even worse, is that it's saying, no, we don't even talk about getting insight from spirits, but we are spirits, and the spirit is urging us to survive. And then he starts, anyway, that's another big part of its system, is this urge to survive, but the divine in us, but by qualifying us that there's a divine in us, that's already demonic. I mean, you're already, I mean, at the core of that, you're looking at some of the most demonic teachings that ever come into redemptive or into history, which served for redemptive history, is that live Eden, that you'll be like God in a way that God did not create you to be. Anyway, it comes dressed up like just another. I'm just gonna say this. I think all social psychology, because of its poor presuppositions, it can all be placed just alongside Dianetic therapy in terms of its fundamental, just creating a guise for humanity to get by and to deny the truth that we have walked away from the living God, and that the way back is through the cross. These are just systems that are just functional ways to people to make sense of the world and to not have to actually be reconciled and enter into that blessing of that Christ can only provide. That just Dianetic therapy just has that's just what we've studied, and we found those roots. Now I'm thinking if we did take the time to really get behind some of the other major psychology thinkers, I bet we'd find probably some more demonic ties. I'm assuming. That's just, again, an assumption.
Yeah, I was thinking, it's super strange how it masked itself up like that. And the sad reality too, like you mentioned, like it actually isn't really helping people. Like it's just, they're just counterfeit ways to deal with the subjective sense of guilt and the subjective sense of our guilt before a holy, just God. And when we don't want to go to him, we feel like we got to go somewhere to find relief, right?
Yeah.
Because our conscience, I think, is all pricked, and we all know the oughts and the things to do and what not to do, and we all know that intuitively. That's the way God's wired us and created us. And we start experiencing trauma or guilt or experiences that leave you feeling, in a sense, overwhelmed, you go somewhere to find relief, and these people offer that, but in reality it's not genuine help. It's just like you mentioned, Heath, like a more a pushing down, a more of a suppression of truth. And it's a sad reality, and it's just sad that, and I'm sure people are good intentioned, but when people
Right.
tried to keep the ark from falling, they had good intentions, but God struck them dead. So
Great example. Yes.
it's not my own personal, it's Nick, the other host, always uses Old Testament examples, so I stole it from him, but it's a good one, to show that even when we have good intentions doesn't mean that's the way God wants us to do it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I could go on talking too long on this stuff. But yeah, it's been it's been great being able to meet with you guys and chat over worldviews and the importance of knowing a worldview, particularly in this case Scientology. I think the hope is that if anyone is listening, I hope that if they know family or some people close that have gotten into this, that this would be, I don't know, maybe spur them on to continue to be in prayer in the very least for those people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, amen. Did you guys have any, like, so if our listeners are interested in more of this topic, like, if you get me a link or something, I can try to, put it on the description for the listeners if they want to pick up your guys' work.
Yep, I sent it over to the Facebook chat.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay. I saw it pop up, but I didn't even look at it. Okay, great. Yeah. And I'll definitely link that in the description for you guys that are listening. And then I'd also, listeners, tell others about this, especially if you guys know people and you want to be a blessing to them, share this podcast with them, or talk to, give the book information to them. And then on top of your guys' own work, I don't know if you had anything else that you would want to recommend or encourage the listeners to understand or know about, or any recommendations from your own study or stuff they may want to look into if they're curious more on this topic.
Yeah, the Book of Mormon. I'm kidding.
That was my second one on my list. So yeah, somehow we had that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just got a, what's that Lutheran satire cartoon stuck in my head? They had a Mormon. Anyway, sorry.
No, I know.
I need to wake up. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any more research on the top of my head other than our book. But do you think you
I'm always an original sources type. Like, I think if someone really wants to, Hubbard's book is actually, although it is Dianetics is long
and boring,
it's also but you might do is, if you did, well, one way to make it easy is if you did get our little book. It's like 60 pages on a smaller, I don't know how big it is, but 30 pages on a Word doc, but you can go through and find those citations and then just go into his Dianetics and then read it in its context. I think it's interesting that I think if someone can get into Hubbard's writings, and then be able to share that with whomever, I think that really hits and strikes the heart, because it's not really beating around the bush, or whatever phrase one might use. It's just getting straight to the point. I think that oftentimes with worldviews, or with world religions, with false gospels, just getting at the core of what they're saying, and to be able to share that with those who are into it, then they have to really be confronted with what they say they believe. They're really being confronted with what they believe, and realizing, wow, this is not a gospel of hope. This is not truth. So I think that's why I do pair that with Dianetics, and with maybe even shooting around on their website. Their website, like Jake mentioned earlier, they're one of the few religions that actually do write a lot in terms of cultic groups, other than Mormonism. There's a couple of major ones that actually have a lot, but many groups out there that have nothing really, and yet they're groups. But yeah, their website's great. Dianetics, and our little book would probably get someone more information than they need.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely interested in this. I'm going to have to look more into this, because it's always kind of been just a experience of mine running into these types of people and these types of ideas. Being in the past, before I was a Christian, I struggled a lot with drugs and alcohol. So I was in a few of the inpatient rehabs and outpatient rehabs, and a lot of the kind of psychology and things they use is very similar to a lot of the kind of things you guys are bringing up. I know one of the big things was the law of attraction was a big thing, and then tarot cards, and all kinds of different ways that are supposed to help you find some relief from your subjective experiences of guilt and addiction and idolatry. It's a weird thing.
Yeah, well said. Yep.
But I will give shout out to law of attraction. I did use it twice and shot 2 half-court shots at the basketball place, and I said the ball's gonna go in the net. It's just gonna go in. I already see it. It's in there. Threw it up there, went in. I was like, oh my gosh, this stuff works. And then I did it. I think I don't remember if I made it the second time, or I made I didn't believe enough. And then I think it was like the third one I made again. I was like, oh, I believed enough again. But
right.
Just shout out to law of attraction for helping me feel like I was cool or something back in the day. But but it genuinely doesn't work, obviously. But I just thought it was a funny thing after watching the secret documentary.
You're right, though. I think it does play into someone's confidence a little bit too, where people get more confident when they just assert themselves to do something. Of course, you're going to have a little more of a strength and composure when you do something. But yeah, that's funny stuff. And you're right. That has a lot to do with Scientology as well. It's just that law of attraction. And witchcraft.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. It was it's just weird stuff, man. Like, it's amazing the kind of things these people push. Like, just believe that you're gonna have a new bicycle tomorrow, and you're gonna have a new bicycle tomorrow. You just have to believe it. You'll have it. And you're just like, it's just so weird, but it's like they're dead serious talking about it. So super weird.
That's how Jake started our podcast. Jake said, I want a podcast. I'm going to speak it in, and that's what started ours.
I mean, I said it, and then the next day we were making podcasts. So
like, we had all the gear and everything. It was weird. Weird.
Oh man, dude, Christianity is false. Oh no. I'm just kidding. But
right.
Yeah, obviously. But yeah, no, this has been fun, guys. Sam, did you have any concluding questions, thoughts, encouragement?
No, I just want to thank you guys. This was a really cool discussion. I appreciate your time.
Cool. Yeah, sorry for being late.
No, it's all good. I really
thanks for having us.
Yeah, for sure. And I knew Jake would show up. I wasn't even worried about it. Intuitively, I just was like, he'll be here.
Did you speak into existence?
Yeah.
I just kept saying he's here. He is here.
Actually, that might have been what it was when you sent that chat.
Oh yeah.
It spoke Jake out of his
Slumber.
limbo or whatever.
Well, that's right, because
slumber.
I said, "Hey Jake, when you wake up," implying that you're going to wake up. Just go
Okay.
ahead and hop in.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah. But no, this has been fun, guys, and we'll definitely love to have you guys back on and talk about some other topic you guys like to talk about or whatever. We're all trying to support each other in our own ways, and we want to help you guys out as well. So
Sweet.
yeah, we'll
Thank you.
definitely. I'll make a cool thumbnail with you guys. Maybe we'll get like some cool Scientology stuff in your background, and I'll get you up and probably a little bit. Once I got a bunch on the back burner, but we'll get yours out there when I can. But I'll tag you
Sweet.
guys in it, and yeah, man, this has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, God bless you guys.
Back at you.